Hi everyone. Today we are going to talk about blending oil paint. I'm going to show you two very simple techniques to do that. This first one is simply wet into wet, where you take two color swatches. In this case I have a dark color swatch, a value 2 probably, and my other value swatch is probably somewhere in the middle, maybe a value 5, a mid-tone. And I'm simply going to lay them next to one another, just barely touching, as you can see. I'll take a synthetic brush and simply blend them together, wet into wet. It's a very simple technique, but an excellent one to have in your toolbox. And it's incredibly satisfying when you can do a really nice blend. They're excellent for gradients. Remember, gradients are lost and found edges where you're not sure where one edge begins and the other one ends. And so, if done with a sensitivity, it can really be a, quite beautiful effect and just a really nice passage in your painting. Very simple to do, as you can see here, but there are 3 helpful tips that you can keep in mind to get effective blends. One is to use enough paint, and that is going to take some time and some sensitivity. So the general rule is, in terms of being helpful to understand how to use enough paint, is that the thinner your paint is, the more control the painter tends to have. And the thicker your paint, the less control you tend to have. So it's really a matter of finding the right consistency. And unfortunately, consistencies will change from hand to hand, from artist to artist. So you really have to find the consistency that works for you. And that depends on a few factors. One is the tooth of your paper, or your canvas rather, or your board, whatever the surface you're working on. One helpful universal tip here is really avoiding using too much medium with your oil paint. If you use too much medium, you can create an inky wash, and that should be avoided. You want enough paint that you can blend one color into another here. Tip number 2, I would say, is using the right brush. Now again, it's a combination of the consistency of the paint, the sensitivity of your hand, and the right brush. It was said that Rembrandt could paint anything with a rag and some shoe polish, and that's probably true. So honestly, it's really a matter of you playing around with paintbrushes, surfaces, and the consistency of paint before you really develop those sensitivities. In the beginning, it's certainly helpful to use a softer brush. For this painting, I'm using a synthetic brush, a Scepter Gold 2. It's not important you run out and get the same brush I'm using, but if you use a softer brush, you'll probably have a much easier time at having a softer stroke and leaving less evidence of the brush stroke itself. But the truth is, you can develop a sensitivity of touch, which is our third tip, which is really just sensitivity of touch, just what it is. A lighter hand and just being more present and sensitive and centered when you make the strokes. And if you can develop a sensitive enough touch, you can actually use a hog hair brush and get really quite a sensitive passage. So just to reiterate the 3 tips that are helpful in this case, and again, it really is very simple. Use enough paint, use a soft brush, and softness of touch. In this next approach, you can see I'm laying down a swatch that is a transitional color. And I'm going to lay that right down the middle. And it's really a mixture of the color on the left and on the right. And so by simply blending this transitional value and color, I'm really just blending that into the color on the right and left. So it's really a combination of 3 colors. And this technique is probably most often used when you are trying to soften the edge of paint that has already dried. And the academic principle here is it's better to Soften your edges early on in the painting and make them hard later, because it's much easier to make a soft edge hard than the opposite. So voila, there you go. And the same principles or tips apply here as well. Certainly use enough paint, avoiding the pitfall of adding too much medium to your paint, thereby making it a thin, inky wash. So just make sure you develop a sensitivity to medium to oil paint ratio. I use about no more than 20% medium and 80% paint in my swatches. Synthetic or soft brushes, and the most important one is sensitivity to touch. I hope that's helpful. Why don't you give both of these techniques a try and see if you can blend colors and add the art of blending color to your toolbox. I hope that's helpful. Thank you so much.